Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. This is going to be a mousepad roundup. We have a ton of pads on top of pads, and I don't have enough time to do dedicated reviews on all of them. It seems like right now in the mouse market or mouse pad market, we have just clones on top of clones on top of clones. And it is really nice when you find something that is truly unique and something that is not only unique, but something that performs very well. A lot of these mouse pads in this stack do perform well, and a lot of them are priced insanely well for how good they play in game. I want to get into what I like, what I don't like, and show you guys a little bit of gameplay on these particular pads. Let's check it out. All right, guys, so the first pad I want to talk about is the Ikea Landspelar or Landspelar. I'm definitely not pronouncing that correctly, and I'm not going to try, but it is a fairly decent sized black square. It's not large. It's definitely not something if you like a 500 by 500. It is not up your alley. It is 17 and a quarter by 14 and a quarter inches. I personally had absolutely no issue with the particular size of the pad. The desk size version is a different surface feel. It is a little bit smoother, a little bit different speed, and I do prefer the speed of this pad. It is very balanced down the middle. The dynamic friction is at a point where the movements actually are rather effortless, not totally on point speed-wise, both X and Y, but consistent enough that it's not going to be throwing you off in-game. Dynamic movements are very fast, and those static movements actually are right down the middle, very balanced. You're not going to be getting any additional control, slowdown, or tug, and it's not anything that is going to be giving you additional speed or just a very low initial friction. So those small little movements are actually going to feel quite controlled and concise, and I do love that about this pad, especially for $9.99. You can tell, though, the quality of the pad is certainly for $9.99 not going to reach or breach the area of a Aqua Control 2 or a Artisan Hien or Artisan Zero. You do get little dust particles and hair stuck in the pad, and my edges are already fraying, so that is certainly something that I don't necessarily like. But the foam is probably about 3 or 4 millimeters thick and actually feels good in the sense that it doesn't give way. It's more like a Artisan mid, meaning you are going to maintain a lot of consistency on the pad, especially in those scenarios where you're tensing up and maybe accidentally pushing your mouse into a softer density foam pad in certain situations in game. So for $10, the Ikea pad definitely gets a thumbs up for me. Certainly, again, the quality could be better, but the pad is $9.99 and it performs extremely well. So if you are on a tight budget, check out the Ikea pad. And guys, next up is the Pulsar Paracontrol. And I just want to note that in today's mousepad market, it's actually quite hard to review pads because everything that is coming out seems to be either a Artisan Hien clone or an Artisan Zero clone. And the reason why people are cloning the Artisan Hien and Zero is because they are extremely and emphatically good pads, right? The material of the Paracontrol is kind of like the material on the Hien. The material itself, the fibers are probably a little bit shorter and closer to the pad, and they are a little bit tighter knit. So they are a little bit less abrasive feeling when you are gliding, a little bit less audible on the mouse skates. You don't feel the surface quite as much as you feel the Hien on the mouse skates themselves. And I do think that the X and Y differential is actually better on the Pulsar Paracontrol than the Hien. In terms of quality of the pad, this is a review unit, but I do have a fiber at the top right of my pad that is sticking up, and I do think that the stitched edges are a little bit abrasive on the arm. If you are an arm aimer, you will kind of feel these stitched edges on your arm itself, and the base of the pad does wiggle a little bit on my desk, but I never had an issue in game, so I do think that's kind of a non-issue. In terms of the speed of the pad, I actually do find it to be a little bit slower of a Hien. So I do really like the performance of the pad. It is very close to a Hien at $24.95 with just a little bit more control and, again, a better X and Y differential in my personal opinion. The dynamic friction is rather effortless. You do get a little bit reduction in speed, again, over the Hien. And static friction feels very good with no muddiness or tug. And, again, a little bit slower in speed, in my opinion, over the Artisan Hien. So if you're looking for a little bit slower of a Hien at $24.95, the Pulsar Paracontrol might be right up your alley. And guys, speaking of pads that inch ever so closely to a Artisan Zero, you have the Spyre Kamek. The surface material itself is quite different than a Artisan Zero or something like a Saturn Pro. It feels a little bit harder and a little bit more fibrous, a little bit more grainy than something like a Saturn Pro or an Artisan Zero. I actually personally love the surface. I think it handles moisture and humidity extremely well. It didn't have any issues whatsoever. And the dynamic friction, initial friction to me kind of feels similar to the Saturn Pro, but static friction feels a little bit faster, a little bit easier, more maneuverable on the Spyre Kamek. So if you're looking for a little bit extra control with slower movements, smaller movements, certainly the Saturn Pro might be the way. If you're looking for a little bit faster movements on those slow, staticky movements, the Spyre Kamek might be the way. Again, the pad is a little bit more fibrous. You feel it a little bit more. And I would say the only downside to this pad is the stitched edging. The stitched edging literally looks like my drunk grandmother went to a knitting party and said, hey, let me do stitched edges on your mouse pad here. And I'm not really somebody who cares about that. It's really just a cosmetic type issue. As long as the pad edges do not interfere with me in game, I don't want to feel the edges of a pad as I am kind of, shifting my arm while I'm aiming. And this pad does do quite a good job at not getting in my way. I don't feel the stitched edges. They're not abrasive on my arm. So I personally don't really care what they look like. What I care about is the performance of the surface itself. And there's just no getting around the fact that the performance of the surface of the Kamek is exceptionally good. The foam is a little bit softer than something like the Ikea Pad and the Pulsar Paracontrol. I would kind of put this at the soft variant of a Artisan pad. I do think that the Saturn Pro is a little bit more pancakey than the Spyre Kamek. So keep that in mind. If you are somebody who likes firmer pads, you might want to look at something like the original Saturn or a Zero Mid. But the performance of the pad, the material of the pad itself is different enough than the Saturn Pro and an Artisan Zero that I definitely do recommend picking this pad up. Again, it is one of my favorite cloth surfaces that I've tried recently. And guys, next up, I actually have a collection of mouse pads. This is the Kovaaks collab with Esports Tiger. I personally think that all of these pads happen to be quite good. I don't know why they don't have more coverage out there on YouTube or in the community in general. I do think that the Morpheus that I have here and the Chaos are a little bit more of your generic cloth feeling pads, but they do provide a little bit something else that the other pads that we've spoken about don't really provide, and that is you do actually get quite a bit of additional mud feeling on the Morpheus with those slow calculated movements. So if you're somebody who needs that or you're looking for that in something like your tack shooters, you will actually find that on this pad. I do think that the stitched edging on the pads is actually quite damn good. It's very level with the surface itself, and the edging is very good. In terms of the material of the Morpheus, it's a little bit actually more grainy even than something like the Kamek. The fibers kind of stick up vertically as you are rubbing your hands, and it kind of makes it feel like an abrasive surface when you're rubbing your hand vertically. But then when you go horizontally, it actually is quite a bit smoother, making me think that there's definitely a X and Y differential in terms of speed. But dynamic friction here is actually pretty open and balanced. I wouldn't say it's speedy. I wouldn't say it's controlled, muddy, tuggy. But again, those static movements, when you start going very slow, it's almost like you are moving your mouse through a little bit of mud. So if you need that, if you have shaky hands, I would definitely say check out the Morpheus, which on the bottom is actually says the Meta. So I'm not sure if this is known as the Meta, but it is the Morpheus on Addis's website. In terms of the next pad, I actually prefer, aesthetically speaking, the Chaos over the Morpheus, and the feel is a heck of a lot smoother on the hand and on the skates than the Morpheus. I do think that this pad is a little bit faster for those staticky, slow movements. You don't feel quite as much mud, like you're dragging your mouse through something, like you have a magnetism effect to the pad. And dynamic movements are actually pretty close, but I would say they are a little bit faster, a little bit more open as well over the Morpheus. So if you are looking for just a little bit of control for those slow movements, and then just a nice balanced movement for everything else and a nice smooth pad, the Chaos is actually pretty damn good, and it actually is a pad that has the same stitched edging as the Morpheus. So again, nothing bad about the stitched edging at all. And I did not personally have any issues with humidity, moisture, etc. The pad that I personally like the most out of all the Kovaaks pads is called the Target. This is something that is more akin to a Aqua Control 2. It feels more like your hybrid type material. So something like the Pulsar Paracontrol, something like a Hien, an Aqua Control 2, an Aqua Control Plus. X and Y actually do feel a little bit different. Horizontal movements feel a little bit faster, in my opinion, than vertical movements. Again, nothing that is going to throw you off in game. And I do think that, personally speaking, the speed of this pad is kind of something that is more up my alley than something like in Aqua Control 2. I like the fast, open, dynamic movements, and for those slow movements, you actually do get a tiny bit of control. Nothing that's muddy, nothing that's tuggy. So something that's kind of similar to the Chaos, but I would say a little bit faster. And I do think that the surface material itself is going to be a little bit more durable. I actually would love to see this particular surface in a design aspect like what Esports Tiger produces on their own pads, like the HuoYun Special Edition, the Longteng 2. I love their designs, and I personally think that if you're into those soft, smooth cloth surfaces, kind of like the Chaos, I would actually kind of refer you to the Longteng 2 HuoYun Special Edition, because the X and Y actually do feel quite a bit more consistent, and you don't feel a difference in feel, hand feel, or skate feel when you are changing directions with X and Y. The pad kind of feels like the Chaos, but in my opinion feels actually a little bit more consistent in feel just because of that X and Y differential. And I do think that if you're looking for something like the Chaos, I would actually maybe go for the HuoYun Special Edition if you are into the design. And if you're into the design of the Chaos, I would probably just stay with the Chaos because that differential really doesn't make too much of a difference. I'm personally into these like super vibrant colors and designs from Esports Tiger. So this is actually just a pretty damn cool mousepad that performs really well in game as well. And something that actually felt very good with the last mouse gates, the Pulsar Superglides on my Pulsar X-Lite V2. And guys, just like that, we get done reviewing all of those pads, and we have another few pads to look at. These will come in a future video. I have the Padsmith pad and the Vancer Ice pad, both of which are actually very unique surfaces and ones that I enjoy greatly. All of the pads that we looked at in this little overview video, all of them could be extremely good for you. It really just depends on what you're looking for in surface feel, price, and what you are looking for in terms of different scenarios, either Apex or something like tac shooters like Valorant or Counter-Strike Global Offensive. If you need more static control, or if you're looking for slower dynamic movement speed, certainly you can get that either slower or faster with a few of the pads that we've gone over today. If you guys have any questions, let me know in the comments. I'll certainly try to answer any questions that you guys may have. But I hope that helped giving you guys a little bit more information, a little bit closer look at a lot of those pads. I hope it helped, guys. If it did, please leave a sub to the channel. I'll see you guys in the next review. Peace.